Good evening, Zambia, and welcome to the Conversation podcast. My name is Anthony Mukwita. I will be hosting this program in the place of Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba, who has been running the program since it started almost 2 years ago, but is currently indispensable. Just a little background before we dig into the conversation for those that do not know me. My background is two ways. I come from a media background. I was editor-in-chief of the Zambia Daily Mail and managing director. Before that, I was one of the first international correspondents for Bloomberg News for the first time it came into Zambia. And after that, my most recent job was that of being a representative of Zambia to the Federal Republic of Germany as ambassador. Before that, I was in Sweden as chargé d'affaires. But we are not here to talk about me today. I just thought we should acquaint ourselves a little bit before I introduce to you on this program a very important man. Now, this is what is going to be happening on the podcast. We will be looking at serious social, political, and economic issues that directly affect us as Zambians. We will talk about poverty, we'll talk about liberty, we'll talk about justice, and we'll talk about just even happiness. We'll talk about a lot of things. We shall not start a fight, but neither shall we run away from it. We shall not stir controversy, but we're not going to run away from it. We shall ensure that we discuss issues in a mature, factual, and balanced manner. This is now what brings me to the guest in the night for this debut program. He was chosen very carefully the way Jesus chose his disciples. And I do not need any blasphemy here. I know we are a Christian nation. The man we have in the house today needs very little introduction. I will give you his name and then we will hear from him so that he can give us a little bit more detail about himself. Our guest for the first podcast after Brother Emmanuel Mwamba is Honorable Binwell Chisangundu. He's an independent member of parliament in the Zambian parliament. Honorable Mpundu, welcome to the podcast.
Ambassador, good evening to you. First of all, you love Mr. Chisanga. It's Binwell Chansa.
Binwell Chansa Mpundu. I am most grateful. You know, there is nothing so disrespectful than not getting people's names correctly.
No, that's okay.
For the record, Honorable Binwell Chansa Mpundu. I suppose this is from either Northern Province or Luapula.
So I'm typically Luapula. So my mother comes from Chembe. My father up north in Chienge, so between Chief Mununga and Chief Puta.
Amazing.
So I'm a typical Luapula gentleman.
Amazing. Abatavwa, they also come from Kaputa, right?
So the whole north part of Zambia, so the Tabwa area is a big area. It covers, I think, mostly those from Unchelenge up north into Kaputa.
Yeah.
As for the Ushis and the Ngumbos, they are all around Samfia, Mansa, Chembe, thereabout.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Let's start with this. You are known to be one of the most youthful members of parliament in the Zambian legislature. I think the last time I was checking on you, unless anything has changed, you should be about 43 years old.
Yeah, I'm turning 43 in October this year. Even though the word youthful or youth is being debated, you hear people say, you can't be a youth. Interestingly, Ambassador, and this is what people ought to understand. Politics as more like, defined youth differently.
Indeed.
The UN actually defined youth to be 35 and below. Commonwealth identifies anyone 45 and below to be youth.
Okay.
So all of us at Parliament who are below 45 were actually part of the caucus of youth parliamentarians.
Amazing.
Because Commonwealth recognizes us to be youth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, tell me something.
Yeah.
Let's move a little bit further because I want people to get an appreciation of whom you are. Even though you are a household name, there is certain people who do not know who you are. So we have established the fact that you are going to be 43 this year. That must have made you how old when you became a member of parliament?
So I was about 30, maybe 38.
Yeah.
Somewhere there.
Now that we have established that, why did you choose public service above everything else? Because from what I understand, you also have qualifications as a lawyer and an accountant. Why did you not decide to open up a law firm or an accounting firm, but you chose to get into public service?
So interestingly, Ambassador, I come from a very, modest background, if you like. I'm a ghetto child. Grew up from the least you can describe. At some point, Ambassador, life wasn't much favorable to me and our family then, that I had to go begging on the street. And so I have struggled much of my life to get to where, I pictured I should be.
How bad were things? Were you able to have at least a meal per day? Or you went to sleep hungry at some point?
Not really in that context. My father used to work for the National Service. So most of our lives we lived in the National Service camp up until we retired in 1995. At that time, I was just about to go, if I was not going to, grade 8 then. And I think that that's where trouble started because, working for the National Service back then, even the little package he got, the take-home pay was quite very little. Something that would just enable him to get a house, a pension house, and nothing more. And so I then started to struggle through to secondary school. I remember coming back home from Kawambwa Secondary School, Kawambwa Boys, after our second term, only to be told by my parents that unfortunately they couldn't afford to take me back to school.
And in what grade was this when you got this shell shock news that you could not go back?
This is now leading me into the third term of my 11th grade.
Just a year before you can graduate high school.
Graduate, and so
you're told that you can
practically dropped out of school in my 11th grade, leading into term 3. Now, I didn't stop there. I couldn't let that misfortune sit on my future, or what I desired to be. I reached out to relatives, and I found my uncle. Who then decided to take me back into my 12th grade.
Do we have a name for this uncle?
Yeah,
Where is he now and what's happening?
My uncle is Pastor Chola, a very famous man in Mufrira, in the Tabernacle Church. So he's a pastor in the Tabernacle Church. He's still alive. He's now in Chingola. Very dear to me. He's literally the surviving parents we have, alongside my uncle on my mother's side, who is in Luapula in Mansa. So these are the people after my heart. And so my uncle then took over. I went then into my 12th grade. So I only missed the third term of my 11th grade. God provided through my uncle.
Indeed.
I completed my grade 12. I struggled to get my formal education, you must know. I can safely say that I educated myself, the accountancy. That time we were doing the NATEC, the National Accounting Program by Zika, which was a 2-year program. And so it was designed to be done in 2 years. But those who tell you about NATEC,
indeed,
it was not a course to play with. And very few managed to even complete it in 2 years. I think that time Zika was even trying to regulate accountancy, so it looks like there was specific number of accountants they wanted to churn out into the field. So I got lucky that I was able to complete this program in 1 year, 6 months.
Normally, how long would it have taken?
it would have actually taken me over 2 years.
Amazing.
Because a lot of people actually went 5 years having not completed.
Really?
One could have actually done all these courses, only one. Taxation, auditing then was quite tough courses.
This seems to explain how when you are articulating some issues in Parliament, you seem to have numbers, statistics, and figures on your fingertips. So we move a little bit now from the accounting, and then there is also an aspect of you of having done law. How did that happen, and where did it happen?
So from NATEC, then I continued to pursue licentiate. At that time, I'd gotten into formal employment. I'd even risen from being assistant accountant.
Where was this? Where were you working now?
I was working in Kitwe for some, private companies called the Tochima company.
Indeed.
And then I saw the need, especially that I'd now gotten into politics with the PF. I saw the need for me to get, some basic understanding of the law.
Which year is this when you decided to jump in bed with the Patriotic Front?
So I jumped into bed with the PF around 2006, 2007, thereabout. And I quickly rose through the ranks and file of the PF.
What was the motivation? Why didn't you join the United Nations, UPND? Why didn't you join the MMD? But you decided to jump in bed with the Patriotic Front.
I think back then, the MMD had already started messing up, and a lot of us wanted to align with a visionary person, and Michael was a visionary politician then. I think everyone wanted to align themselves with Michael, and that was the motivation for me to jump into bed with Patriotic Front. So because I had then formally gotten into politics, I saw the need for me to acquaint myself with the law. And that's how I started studying, law with the University of Zambia. But it was not to be a degree. I started with a diploma. Only got lazy after I had done. I actually did very well.
Indeed.
I got a merit, almost a distinction.
Almost.
If not just for 1-2 marks, I would have gotten a distinction at diploma level. That's why. So you see this conversation in public with the UPND championed conversation saying, no, you're actually not a lawyer. Unfortunately, the law describes a lawyer as somebody who is actually studying and somebody who could have done some basic, law program. So those who did law with NIPA are actually called lawyers. Now, the distinction is that you only qualify to be, a practicing when you get a degree and go to Ziale. But otherwise, even if you are a student in first year, you actually be called a lawyer. So when I presented my credentials at Parliament, so they now call Aniba lawyer, Aniba accountant, and stuff like that.
And in any case, now you are a lawmaker.
An accountant. Oh, of course.
Which is much bigger than
much bigger.
A university degree in law.
What Parliament does, it exposes you to much more than school can give you.
Indeed.
Because school is limiting. In a particular field. At Parliament, you become more or less a jack of all trades. Because then
master of none.
Because then you acquaint yourself with what goes on in the mining sector, in the energy sector. Today, if you ask me about the energy sector, because I'm part of the Committee of Parliament on Energy, I think I can speak about energy issues more than most, energy experts at the moment. And that's what the magic that, Parliament does. I've been telling friends that I wish that Parliament would give a certificate after you walk out of Parliament, because it exposes us to so much knowledge.
It actually does. We will get back to that. But before we get back to your public service as a lawmaker, as a legislator, I thought maybe our viewers would also like to know a little bit about your family. I mean, you're a good-looking, handsome young man. You dress well, sharply. You smell like $1 million. I've seen the women are already asking for your number already here on the conversation.
You put me into trouble.
That's where the trouble is now.
So,
are you married? Do you have a family?
So
what is the name of the wife and the kids, and how old are they?
So God blessed me with a very beautiful woman I poached from Mufulira. A Namwanga woman called Nandeka Chela. Mr. Chela is a very famous man in Mufulira. And this woman has given me 4 very, let me say, angels.
Indeed.
Interestingly, our firstborn son is actually completing secondary school this year.
Amazing. How old is he?
He's actually turning 17. He's only 16 in November.
43-year-old man with a
16, 17-year thereabout.
17-year-oldest son.
Yeah,
and what are their names?
So
and what
our firstborn son is called Sean Mpundu. He's actually, so they all carry my mid name. So
Indeed.
Sean Mpundu.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Deliberately so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Initially, I'd wanted all of them to carry Chance as their surname, but complication arose. Because you see, I used to argue with my father that Mpundu cannot be a surname. It's a title.
It's a title.
So
By the way, can you just explain the Mpundu thing? Because my assumption and that of many in Zambia is that if Mpundu is your last name, that means you are a twin. Does it?
So, and ordinarily, you should be a twin. But in our case, my father was Binwell Mpundu. So Mpundu was a surname.
So you're actually Binwell Mpundu Jr.
Exactly. Yeah. So
it's got nothing to do with you having another.
Nah.
Alrighty.
So my firstborn son. So I'd wanted them to carry Chance as as a surname,
just as a breakaway from the
exactly. But complication arose, so we would say, look, you're going to create a complication because they will not be aligned to you as a Binwell Mpundu. So that's how we added them Mpundu. So they're all more or less Binwell. This is Sean Chance Mpundu. Our second born daughter is doing grade 7 now. She's Skylar. So Skylar, we gave her an Amwanga name, Lukundo.
What does Lukundo mean?
Love.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then my third born daughter is after my mother. She's Shanice. Shanice Mpundu. And then we've got the last one who's only 2 years old, who is now after me, a third generation.
Yeah.
So my father was Binwell Mpundu. I'm Binwell Mpundu Jr. Third generation is supposed to be Mac. So we have a Mac Binwell Mpundu.
Amazing, amazing. And your mom, your mother, she, of course, she's a strong influence to you.
Too much. In fact, my mother is.
Do we still have her around?
Sadly, I lost both my parents. My mother passed earlier. My father only passed on 2 years ago. My mother is the biggest motivation for me getting into public service, or rather into politics.
Indeed.
She had these fantasies, interestingly, that whilst we were very young as a little baby, she had taken this little boy called Binwell to Bakaunda then for blessings.
Really?
Yeah. So she had all this conviction that you should end up like Bakaunda, and so she was desirous that I get into politics.
That's interesting, because Kaunda was the president of Zambia for a very long time. Actually became president just 3 years before your current age, at 40 years. And your mother saw that vision of you into turning into a Kaunda one day. I am probably jumping the gun, but do you think this could mean that you have some presidential aspirations to become and turn into reality that vision that your mother, by the way, we didn't get her sweet name again.
Oh, she was Charity Mumba.
Madam Charity Mumba. Wouldn't you want to live up to her vision that you become president of Zambia one day?
So interestingly, my mother's fantasies comes from two aspects. So when I was being baptized as a little child in the United Church of Zambia, my mother narrates that the one who was holding me was Frederick Chiluba, the late president.
Wow. 2 presidents now.
And then she runs to Bakeke for blessings, and Bakeke puts on a handkerchief on my head.
Yes.
And
the famous white
the famous white. So my mother's fantasies was that one day you're going to end up like Bakeke.
Yeah.
So she wanted really that I get into politics. Biggest motivation. But I can tell you that Bakeke's motivation for us, for me in particular, was that when we were growing up as young people in the National Service Camp, we used to have those, they were called coupons, rations. free things that the National Service used to receive, cooking oil.
Not really free. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
And then,
subsidized.
And then in 1991, after the transition of government to the MMD, all those things were cut off. So I thought that KK was the best, and I wanted to, really live up to this man. We literally idolized KK.
You inspired you greatly.
Yeah. Yes. So as to whether I want to be like KK, yes, I would like to be. I think that at 40, KK built a strong and firm foundation for this country. Only that in later years, others came to destroy that very foundation. I am of the view that given a chance, we can go back to that foundation.
To the greatness.
Greatness.
Make Zambia great again.
Zambia great again.
Which reminds me, if I have to push a little bit, because I know we have a lot to catch up. So when do you intend to get on the ground and start campaigning to become president of Zambia and bring Zambia back to the greatness?
It's a big call to make. I think at the moment I want to do what I can do while it's in Parliament.
Yeah, you're already doing a great job as a parliamentarian. Yes, I have personally followed you. I have seen some bills that you have challenged, opposed, and supported. I think it is general knowledge for some of us who are socio-political economic buffs that you definitely have an impact. As a first-term parliamentarian, you are probably much more known than some members of parliament that have been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
So that's why I am asking, having recorded these few successes so far, when do you intend to get on the ground and start making, drum rolling, and beating the call to become president of Zambia so that you can live up to the aspirations of your mother, who I know you hold very dearly, who saw that dream of you with FTJ, saw that dream of you with Kaunda, both great people, the first president, the second president of this country in the 60 years that it's been independent. When does Binwell Mpundu, when does Binwell Mpundu get on the ground and say, I'm taking off the gloves. I don't care what you say. I'm going to run for president now. When does this happen?
So first of all, thank you for the recognition that whatever little that I am doing is something to marvel at or at least recognize. I'm very grateful for those sentiments. I think for me at the moment, I want to tread very carefully. The dynamics of politics keeps changing every day. And one thing you don't want to make is to miss the 10. Most politicians have always missed the 10. And so I am watching the unfolding events politically very carefully with an open mind, open eyes and ears to see when does it become convenient to go in. Otherwise, right now, the terrain looks very conducive.
Why would you say that? Are you saying that the time is ripe for a younger generation of leaders? The time is ripe for Binwell Mpundu and other like-minded people to get into the rough terrain of presidency?
I think that the call is louder, on younger people to, venture into the leadership of
Why
this
would
country.
you say that? Is there anything wrong with the status quo that we have? We have a 62-year-old president in human life years that is still pretty young, meaning he became president probably when he was what, maybe 59, 60? He's 62, he's got a year ahead of him. Why would you want to change what is happening? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, unfortunately, the leaders we have now, all things being equal, have done the worst we can ever imagine.
The worst.
At leadership. And that brings the question of, can we continue recycling the same leaders? Because some of the leaders under the 62-year president you've mentioned have been at the game for many years. They've actually kept on changing, keep on, coming back under or with a different jacket. And so you find a conversation in the community where people are beginning to think of there is need for a overhaul, or at least an attempt to try and bring in fresh minds.
When you are at that, so we've had 7 presidents. We are on our 7th president. We've had Dr. Kenneth Kaunda at 40 years old, whom you have exalted, becomes president, followed by President Frederick Chiluba at 48. He becomes president. He's coming from a trade union movement background. And then we have a lawyer, state counsel, former Solicitor General Levi Patrick Mwanawasa. And then we have after him a former diplomat, Rupia Bwezani Banda. From Bwezani Banda, we have that strong man from a security background and trade union, Michael Chiluba. From there, we have President Edgar Lungu, lawyer, very strong too. And then now we have President Hakainde Hichilema, an economist. I want you to run us through in a minute. I know they have long histories. Some did 1 term, another one did 2 terms, another one did even 27 years. I was just wondering if I had to put you on the spot to give us what inspires and disenchants you on the 7 that we have, starting from Super Ken in a minute.
Well, I don't want to be caught on the wrong side of judgment or analysis.
It's your opinion, and we're not here to judge. Indeed, yeah.
For me, I think that whilst one is of good age, with a sound mind, energies, that is when they need to be given a chance to lead. And I reckon that KK's strength was in his prime years, because most of what Zambia achieved was in the very first years. And so I want to think that the mistake we made around the presidency of Michael shouldn't be repeated. Michael was such a good leader, except we brought him very late when the energies were fading out.
Yeah, the health was also on the decline. Exactly. It was the evening years.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that for me, we need to begin to look at having leaders whilst they are of the energies, they are in their rights.
When they're in their prime.
Yeah, in their prime. But more so for me is that Zambia now needs to begin to count or look for the character. I love the late Miles Monroe. He keeps on emphasizing that as opposed to influence, vision, and all these things, the number one thing to look for in a leader should be character, which has missed in most leaders, in third world countries. Because Miles puts it that with character, you will not need the law to do what is right. I'll give an example of what is happening today.
Indeed.
You don't need to hide in the law to declare your assets. You have to do what is right. If you want to be an accountable leader, you will not have to wait for the law.
Indeed.
You have to say, look, I've come as a pauper, watch how I will live. Or I've come in as a rich man with so many millions in my bank account, watch how I live.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because the ambassador of the United States of America, His Excellency Michael Gonzalez, whom I know you share a very fond relationship with and have worked with, of course, in your line of duty as a parliamentarian, did raise the issue of declaration of assets at an anti-corruption commission event in Livingstone last year. I think the Avani or the Royal Livingstone, if I am not mistaken. And the concern, the big ask he had is that our current president, number 7, HH7, Hakainde Hichilema, had not declared his assets. Now, I am saying this because you have raised that you do not need a law to compel you to say or do the right thing. Like there is no law that tells you that you should feed your dog, but you just feed your dog. There is no law that tells you that you should feed your family. You feed them because it's the right thing to do. Are you concerned about the fact that President Hakainde Hichilema has been under fire for quite a while now for not declaring his assets, even though it is a well-known fact that he's a self-made millionaire? What is your concern? Why do you want the man to declare his assets?
So
we know he was rich before he even got into office.
So my basis is the tenets of good leadership. If you're looking for good leaders in Zambia, look at our character. If I'm going to present myself for leadership at the next level, go back to my life. Look at my character. What do I stand for? What did I stand for? Where I'm coming from? Which is why, if you are one of good character, you will not hide in the law. You will not hide in semantics of, as an example, my private life is mine.
Indeed.
Once you choose to go into public,
there is no more private life now.
So
you are Binwell Mpundu,
exactly.
the legislature, the lawmaker, the member of parliament,
that
the
is
representative of Nkana.
Character is everything with leadership. As the question of accountability, it is the #1 principle in leadership. You must be accountable as a leader, unless we're in the dictatorship. If you choose to align yourself with democratic, disposition, your leadership must be of accountability.
Are you accusing President Hakainde Hichilema of not being accountable?
Well, I'm basically...
Or not being transparent?
I'm basically stating facts as they are.
And what are the facts?
If the establishment is such that, because we want you to be transparent and accountable, as a president, we want you to be staying in this house, and you choose to defy that order, questions then begins to arise. What are you afraid of? Because in that house, we'll be monitoring your every activity. Okay? Accountability kicks in there by the fact that you're going to be under surveillance 24/7. If the demand for accountability is that you must show us what you have so that we're able to assess you as you leave, you must not defy that order or logic in the semantics of there is no law. Because the truth is, yes, there is no law in this land that compels a president to live in State House. There is no law that compels a president to not to declare, or rather to declare his assets. But, logically, if you are a transparent being, you cannot defy these, needs, vis-a-vis the need to tell us what you are worth as we get you into office, so that then we are able to assess whether you stole or you did not steal after you leave. You cannot hide in the name of the law to avoid the people's house. You can imagine with the wealth that Donald Trump has, if he decided, I'm going to live in the Trump Towers.
Or Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. You can imagine the challenge the Americans will have, because there at White House is where every security is. Now, one decision could lead to a number of wrongs that can be committed. The case of Jacob Zuma and the Nkandla, mansion. Because you are president, the system will be compelled to install security installations in your home, right? It becomes natural that they have to do those things to protect your life. And so there's no budgetary allocation in the last 3 years plus that I've been in Parliament that spoke to security installations at Community House.
Indeed. We will get back to that, Honorable Mpundu. We'll get back to that. We seem to have veered off a little bit, because I wanted you to give us a short synopsis of the presidency. I think you have done one on Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, which is the fact that we brought him in during his prime, so he was able to make some radical developmental decisions that got us to where we were until he left office. You have also touched on President Michael Sata, whom you respect so much and admire, but regret the fact that he left too early because he got into office too late. And now we have spoken about President Hakainde Hichilema.
Did you want me to give a brief on all of them?
Yes. Remember I said a minute. At least you have given on 3. But of course, there is a lot to talk about on the current one. Okay. Even though you have, because he is the current, he is the captain of the ship right now. So just wondering if you could also just say a few words on the other ones, Rupia Banda, Levi Mwanawasa, and Edgar Lungu. Because you have spoken at least about the first 3 and FTJ. Yes.
Well, let me just say in a nutshell that for me, I think that they all are their own strength.
Of course. And their weaknesses.
And their weaknesses as well.
Like all human beings.
The late president,
yeah.
Frederick Chiluba, came at a point where everybody was tired, and they needed somebody to bring some freshness,
some
fresh
energy.
breath, some energy.
Indeed.
And it worked well. The liberalization worked well for Frederick, except I think that they mismanaged the agenda of privatization. It costed this country dearly. So it looks like the downside of Chiluba's strength was, the privatization, because then it negated all the strides made by KK and, the foundation that was made thereof. Levi was unique in his pursuit against corruption, even though at some point I could see a little bit of some weaknesses in the same fight against corruption, because you remember, as an example, we sold off KCM for a song.
Of course. I think $25 million was exactly. An insult, a very direct slap on the face of many.
Exactly. So then you get to then weigh in as to, is this fight genuine? Because how do we then sell off
the country's silver for a song? Yeah.
But I think that
because it appeared to many, and that there is still suspicions that maybe money exchanged hands under the table, because there's no way you can search such a huge, evaluated at more than 100 million, but goes for 25 million.
But Levi was an extraordinary human being. He was, highly tolerant to criticism, even though sometimes he would snap. He would exchange, I remember at a press conference, at a meeting where they traded words with Leonard Hikaumba.
Indeed.
Visibly annoyed the president. Hikaumba goes and also
I actually had my personal encounters with him at a press conference.
But he was a special human being, very special.
And I was charged for sedition, like yourself, which will come back. I was charged for sedition when he was in office. So even though some people sometimes say he was the best, I still remember that I had to flee the country and go to Australia.
Is it?
Because I was charged for sedition.
Very sad.
And his office, during having a conversation like the one that we are having now, when I used to do Let the People Talk with Uncle Frank Butobila. But anyhow,
but if you look at Levi, for me, the best side of his leadership was his ability to take the criticism. How he handled Michael was excellent.
Indeed.
Excellent. A critic, he was still able to bring him closer, treat him as a human being.
Indeed.
Actually confessed that from this man, I've actually been learning a lot.
I've become a better president
on the other
because
side,
of his criticism.
On the weaker side is how he handled, the late Frederick Chiluba. I think humanity dictates that a man that could have literally given you,
the
power,
mantle.
The mantle on a silver, plate.
Yeah.
You can't treat them, even if it meant in the pursuit of corruption. Because Frederick goes down, even in his grave with a tag of, corruption. Even though very little was pinned on him.
Indeed. In fact, nothing. He wasn't found guilty of having stolen anything. And now that you mentioned that, it's a very interesting thing on a judgment call for you as leaders, because even when many Zambians, and we're having a conversation here, it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation. So you say some things, feel free, and also if you feel that I have overstepped, you can cut me off. But many people would have thought that President Frederick Chiluba, when his bid to try and run for a third term. That bid failed. He could have probably chosen Michael Sata to take over from home. He was seen as a natural heir to the presidency, but he went and woke up a man, Mr. Levi Patrick Mwanawasa, a good man who could not even campaign. He campaigned for him properly, because we all remember that, unfortunately, President Levi Mwanawasa had been involved in a near fatal accident that left his speech slurred. President Chiluba had to get out and campaign for him countrywide and win him the election. Some people say that actually that election was rigged, that the late Anderson Kambela Mazoka was the rightful winner of that election, and that some news institutions, including the Electoral Commission of Zambia, made a judgment call of Levi Patrick Mwanawasa being president a little bit too early. As we saw, he only had, I think, about 23%. So if all the opposition had been put together, it means he had lost an election. What do you think about his motivation to get out of his way and make the pursuit of the man that anointed him the sole purpose for his presidency? It's been a quagmire, a complicated collection of paradoxes for many. What in your political education, I know you are not in politics, what do you think in your political education was that? Was that his fight, or it was a fight put upon him by people that campaigned for him?
Well, I think that Levi could have been driven by principle.
The principle that even though I did not deserve to be president, this man campaigned for me.
When the principle is that we fight corruption, the odds says you don't need to leave any stone unturned if the fight has to be, a genuine, fight. I think for me, standing from afar, I can see that the motivation could have been standing on a principle. The challenge, however, is that there's a core to humanity that you cannot, bite the finger that feeds you.
Indeed. Humanity.
So humanity dictates that one who does good to you, you must reciprocate.
Do unto others.
Do unto others what you love them to do unto you. And so it's quite conflicting to balance the two acts. They need to play the human card, and they need to stand on the principle that in this pursuit, no stone should be left unturned. And I want to think that Levi could have been in that precarious, situation, and he chose the other way.
It's an interesting one. Perhaps we can move on in the interest of time
For the late President Arabi, I think Arabi was, by his description, the president of all Zambians.
Why would you say
he was
that?
a gentleman, carefree man, one that I think let his guard down quite easily, that he allowed, a lot of mess to happen under his watch.
Despite his goodness. Despite
he was a very good man.
He's lovely and bubbly.
He was a very lovely man. His nature was just, so lovable, lovely.
Hear no evil, see no evil.
Exactly.
Laugh
but I think that in his goodness, in his cheerfulness, he let his guard down. That, corruption heightened, mismanagement of public resources heightened, even though on record, the economics were doing, the economic fundamentals were very well.
We had about 6 months of reserves in the central bank, of foreign currency reserves. We had fuel reserves. Inflation was single digit. And we had a GDP growth that was growing. I think when he was leaving was about at 7%. We had the exchange rates were doing well. How does a man like that lose an election?
So in politics, there's always a call to balance. They balance the politics and balance the management. Okay, you could have all the fundamentals right and everything seemingly is doing okay. the people are, seemingly able to afford the basic needs and all that stuff. I think that all the parameters were perfectly fine.
Yeah, they were ticked.
But
he ticked the boxes.
He didn't get it right in terms of politics. And remember, when you're going up against a politician like Michael, you need to be at the best of your game politically.
Yes, because it was brutal, Michael.
Exactly.
Yeah, you come with a spoon, he comes with a fork. You come with a knife, he comes with a gun. He just keeps on going until one of you dies.
So there were a few things, there were a few errors made by Arabi vis-a-vis, I think there was a bit of some recklessness. But then he missed out on the politics.
Yeah.
And Michael took advantage. And with Michael, it was very difficult to compete.
It was difficult. He was a brutal man. I mean, I remember he coined the name cabbage. He was brutal. He called his political opponent a cabbage.
Yeah.
He was not kind to a man who had just survived a fatal accident that saw the death of his driver. I remember at a public rally once, he got a cabbage literally and ripped it off. He was ripping off.
But can you now see? Can you see now the contrast?
Indeed.
The contrast in terms of tolerance of our yesteryear leaders.
Indeed.
Levy could tolerate being called a cabbage.
Yes, even being ripped off at a public rally.
Like you say, Michael went as far as Levy had his brain on the tarmac.
Yes.
But he tolerated that to a point where he actually had to send the man for treatment.
Indeed, after being called a cabbage.
Arabi was extremely tolerant as well.
Indeed.
Okay, to some extent, ECL was extremely a human being, a very good heart. You can do very little to fault ECL. Perhaps in his very good nature, a few things went...
He dropped the ball.
Okay? A few things went out of line. Kadas had a field day and all that.
Indeed.
President Hakainde Hichilema is a good man in his own rights. He's got his eyes on the ball, except he may have missed the call to leadership.
Why would you say that? Because if I recall very well, during his long term as an opposition leader, he always called his predecessor, President Edgar Lungu, my former boss, he called him that he had no vision. He gave examples. We were having power cuts due to a drought around 2015, 2016, and he said those things should not have been happening in a country like Zambia when there is countries like, Saudi Arabia, where there is no water, but there was electricity 24/7. And he complained about the skyrocketing exchange rate, and he said and attributed all this to his predecessor, Edgar Lungu, that the reason was because Edgar Lungu did not think very well. I think he made examples also of the exchange rate and the general cost of living. So why would you say that this is not working as well as he said?
I think that the call to leadership is about selflessness, love.
He's not selfless. He's not loving. He's not a loving man.
When you endeavor to serve people, you must live their life. You must live for others. You must put yourself in their shoes. You must imagine or be empathetic, towards their well-being and all this. The man we've now come to see is a man has turned out to be completely different from the man that we saw prior to the 2021 elections.
Really? You feel cheated?
Exactly.
Why would you?
I've never
say
minced
that?
these words because look, everything that President HH stood for has been thrown, into the ocean, or now that we have rivers, into the river.
Indeed.
He is a man that promised to stand to be a champion of the fight against corruption. Statistics tells us today we have actually jumped to almost 599% in terms of corruption.
Are you sure?
Yes.
From
Everything
the
else,
time
from
that
2021.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it that bad?
It's very bad. It's actually very bad. We're talking about corruption that is abated, corruption that is, glorified under the UPND leadership. No firm action, no action whatsoever.
Do you have examples of
Yes.
some of these,
Yes.
allegations that
Yes.
you're making? Can you give us
The
2 or
Ministry
3?
of Health is a typical example. How many scandals have we witnessed in the Ministry of Health? Put aside the revelation by the ambassador. What about the hospital, the $100 million hospital? Very clear, case
What
of
about
corruption.
it? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think that it made headlines that a particular minister who was in charge then was soliciting for some cuts. Okay,
Indeed.
we didn't see any action. The 63 containers, 61
61, I think, from the news reports.
it was in the pretext of a government-to-government procurement arrangement. It wasn't even government-to-government. The ministry was buying medicines from UPA, which is an agency, in Egypt. One would have thought that we were buying medicine made in Egypt. That is why it was a government-to-government.
Yes.
procurement.
Normally, that's how it's supposed to be. If it's government
But
to
then
government.
how do you justify engaging an agency in Egypt to go around the globe to buy medicine for you? They put together.
Why don't you
bring
just
to
buy it yourself?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the revelation of the minister of the permanent secretary, Ministry of Health, who awarded, a contract worth about $6 million to a university that he was vice chancellor to.
Yeah.
Okay. There are quite a lot of examples. I can tell you, corruption is in many forms. It takes many forms. It actually takes decisions that could be labeled corrupt. And I've been citing the issue of targets. They're quite corrupt in nature. When we open next month, you get a report of the Committee on Government Assurance in regards to the target. Then you realize the mess we are in.
Oh, my God.
We are in a big mess. I think that the ambassador to the US made a revelation that we actually are losing about $3 billion every year. So if you go to the FIC, the statistics in terms of corruption.
FIC, is this the Financial Intelligence
Center?
Center, yes.
Yeah.
This is
So
the
they've actually
organization.
done the numbers
Yeah.
to a point where, tax evasions,
illicit funds, exits.
financial transaction have actually, grown in terms of percentages from 2021. Okay, suspicious transaction now stands at 399% from 2021.
So it's been growing.
Tax evasions, 500%, corruption, 599%. Numbers don't lie. So we are at worst. Now, the commitment of the president prior to the 2021 upholding the rule of law, we are now in a circus. We're in a banana republic now, where there are two sets of laws, one that appeals to this class of people and another to the other classes of people.
Are you saying
always-
there is a segregation in the way the fight of corruption is carrying on?
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. In
Why
fact,
would you say that?
In fact, the UPND are not even fighting corruption. They're basically persecuting, opponents. If they were fighting corruption, there would have been many who are serving now would have gone in.
Do you have
those
any
revelations.
names? I know we have cyber
Oh,
laws.
there's cyber laws now.
We have libel laws, we have defamation
I want
laws.
to be very careful
Indeed,
now. I want to
indeed.
be very careful
Yeah.
now.
Well, since we are on the same issue, how did you feel to get a revelation from a foreign mission, from a foreign embassy, to say that a law that restricts you on what you can say or do online or on the internet or in the airspace had been signed 3 weeks, 4 weeks earlier? You did not know about it. And you are a member of parliament. You are in a position to know some of these things. Maybe you did, but many people in Zambia only came to know that the cyber law had been signed by President Hakainde Hichilema when the United States Embassy issued that memo to their people on their embassy page. How did that hit you?
First of all, the process of enacting or amending a law is
which
very
you know
clear.
very well as a lawmaker. Yes.
Starts from the sponsoring ministry.
Yes.
In this case, the Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Technology.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Initiated the repeal and replacement of the Cyber Security Law of 2021 to break it down into two laws: the Cyber Crimes Law of 2025 and the Cyber Security Law of 2025. So the process then went to justice brought to Parliament. Parliament, we fought that bill. Now, prior to that proposed bill coming to Parliament, there were stakeholder engagements, or at least when it came to Parliament, there were stakeholder engagements. Interestingly, there were only 2 days of engagement as opposed to established norm of having 10 days of engagement by a committee of Parliament.
Why do you think
it was
that
rushed?
Was? Yeah.
It was rushed because it was contentious. It was a foolish law. They did not want the public to be fully aware. Now, what happened is that we raised alarm or bells.
You blew the whistle.
We blew the whistle.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to media owners, guys, wake up. There's a law that is about to come that will actually, kick you out of business.
Yeah.
In December last year, the minister, out of pressure, had to withdraw the bills out of Parliament. Okay, so they deferred the law. Only to resurface or to bring them back incognito. I remember only a day to go seeing these 2 bills appearing on the order paper. Now, when a bill is deferred because it lacks, consultations, because stakeholders have rejected it, when you bring it, I think that the procedure should be, since you've now come back, tell us the changes you've made so that we can then agree. Because interestingly, the cyber crimes bill was rejected by everyone, including the Committee of Parliament headed by UPND MPs.
It was that bad?
Yes. All the stakeholders that appeared before these 2 committees that interrogated both, bills, rejected these bills, citing, number one, vagueness in the provisions that were put in those 2 proposals. Secondly, is that the crimes that were being suggested did not meet the benchmark as provided for in the Constitution under Article 18.8. Because for a crime to qualify as a crime, it must be defined.
Indeed.
The crimes being stated in these 2 laws are too vague, do not meet the benchmark of the Constitution.
They don't cut the grade.
So it was thought very highly by all the stakeholders, by the committee. The Committee of Parliament headed by UPND MPs even went on to submit to Parliament through a report saying we have rejected this bill. Now, the question that arises is, if all the stakeholders, if the parliamentary committee rejects a bill, for whom are you going to enact the bill?
Exactly.
And there's a
because you're the representative of the people. Not all Zambians can be in Parliament in any case. Yeah.
Contrary to all those who wants to think that we are just beat down, or there's something we want to protect, the cross-section of society, the majority citizens, rejected these 2 proposed laws.
If my memory serves me right, you were a parliamentarian even around 2021?
Yeah.
Before that, wasn't there a proposal by the Patriotic Front to enact the same law?
So the PF enacted the cyber crimes law.
Yes.
Now, the genesis of this law is that we are very new as a country in the cyberspace.
In the cyberspace, the internet came.
The internet, social media, and all these things.
Yes.
Now, there's need to be a law to govern
how you're going to operate into this new thing.
How you're going to operate in the cyber, space. It was seen that there was a lot of abuse. People would wake up, insult each other, defame others, and stuff like that. So there was a need
behind the veil of the space of the internet space.
So it was seen that there was a need to have a law to guide, and that is what the PF did. They enacted a law in 2021. It was called the Cybersecurity Cyber Crimes Law, which has been in effect or operational since 2021. Very normal law, contrary to the assertions that were, or the fears that most of us had.
Indeed.
Because the fears then, as many videos will tell you from President Hakainde Hichilema,
himself,
these are just, they just want to rig the elections using this law and that. Contrary to all those fears, this 2021 law did not actually infringe on our rights, on our freedoms.
But this one, the current one?
This one has actually gone, off to actually do the things that President Hakainde had spoken to. Remember, the UPND through President Hakainde Hichilema had vowed that they were going to repeal, take away this law. Indeed. Because according to them, before enactment, it was going to infringe on people's freedoms, on people's rights to express themselves, the people's freedom to associate, people's freedom to give opinions. What has happened now in the 2025 law or laws is that they've actually made it much more oppressive or repulsive.
How is that?
The provisions that have now been put in the two laws of 2025 goes to an extent of completely shutting you down. As an example, in one of the provisions in the cybersecurity law is such that whatever you say will put to a test, that it is not misleading, it is not false, okay? Now, when you say a statement is misleading, who is the referee?
Exactly.
Okay.
And who is making the judgment call?
Exactly. Because I always say that the UPND, who are known by now to be, serial liars, cannot be the referee of what statement could be right or false.
That's interesting. We can go on and on, I think, on this law forever, but don't you feel a little bit like you betrayed your electorate's trust by letting it go through as parliamentarians, personally yourself and other parliamentarians? And if that is the case, if President Hakainde Hichilema was able to sign this bill into law, isn't there a feeling that he can do anything else that he wants through the current parliament? For instance, right now there is a discussion about the constitution, several issues such as the planned delimitation exercise. There is a committee that has been formed by the Electoral Commission of Zambia regarding elections, which is also said and believed widely to be illegal. And there is a process already going on engaging the country, the church and civil society regarding the possibilities of changing the constitution, amending it through what is so-called contentious or rather non-contentious issues. If the cyber law, which you say is now more oppressive than what President Hakainde Hichilema initially discussed, did pass through without us knowing what was happening, isn't it possible that the Constitution can be amended in the same way that the cyber law was signed without us knowing, without your ability as legislators to stop anything? And the attendant issues thereof could mean maybe an extension of power into office from 5 years to 7 years, maybe the removal of 50% plus one and revert to first past the post. And all these concerns that are being raised by the church and civil society possible looking at what happened with the cyber law passing into a law?
First of all, let me do a qualification.
Please do.
Because there's a lot of arguments by a lot of people that don't pay attention. It's the reason why I went to start studying law.
Indeed.
Because I did not want anyone to lie
You
to
didn't
me.
want to discuss it without having a legal, at least, background.
Now, there are sessions being made by the proponents of the cyber law, the UPND, the press singers, who tell you, no, we want sanity because there was too much insults. No, there was too much defamation,
libel, and
if
all
you
the
listen,
bad things.
If you listen to President Hakainde, he actually qualified and said, look, there are so many laws.
Yes.
Prior to the 2021 cyber security law, there were
that can
too
protect you
many
against
laws
the insults, the libels, and
that would protect you if you are insulted,
Yeah.
that would protect you if you are defamed. There actually exist many laws today.
Indeed.
That will actually deal with you if you insult, if you defame.
Yeah.
There are too many laws. We did not need, an archaic law such as this one that has been enacted. Now, the human existence, the very fabric of human existence is by our ability to communicate.
Social interaction.
Ambassador, I can tell you that if you took away people's ability to communicate, you would have literally killed those people. Have you ever wondered the struggle that our friends who are challenged speech-wise go through to try and communicate?
I cannot
Have you
fathom.
ever interacted with a person who is deaf? The challenge they go to try and communicate. So you can imagine when you take away the freedoms, the rights of people to just communicate. Because you see, communication in an environment where you have to analyze every word before you speak it is not communication.
Yeah. It's like a job.
Exactly.
You do it because you got to get paid.
So what the UPND haven't realized is that they are taking away the very fabric of our existence.
That is granted. So I was saying, since we know that this is it's not a good thing to do because of the existence of humanity. What else, since President Hakainde showed that he could do this?
I got your question. I was going to go there.
Please do. Take your time.
We are elected to serve people at the behest of the people.
Indeed.
So what we do is not for us, it's for the people.
Yeah.
If you can defy the logic of being a people's representative, then what do you stand for? Who do you then lead? Who do you provide leadership for? Who do you represent? Now, if the people whom you lead will say, we don't want this law, and you go ahead, what else can you do? You can do worse things. Now, our friends are trading on the assumption that they have got the numbers.
Don't they have the numbers?
They do have, and it has been working for them, as evidenced by, the cyber law.
Indeed.
They arrogantly went, using the arrogance of numbers, and changed the law against the outcries of the people.
So if they managed, which is what you are already saying, won't they also then manage to use the arrogance of numbers, as you have said?
Exactly. So
to amend the constitution
to
the detriment of what many civil society members and opposition members of parliament like yourself are saying. So do we have such a fear, or this is just, the fear of the unknown?
So the difference between the cyber law, which requires just, simple majority, and the constitutional amendment, which requires a 2/3, is that whilst it was easy for them to change the cyber law, it is tricky for them to change the constitution because they need 2/3, which numbers they don't have. But we have a challenge. The people that can stop them, from whose numbers they can get, the opposition, PF, and the independents,
like yourself,
seems now to have gone, most of them to have gone into bed, particularly MPs from the PF. We now have a challenge that 3/4 of MPs from PF are dining with the UPND.
I see.
So whereas we thought they do not have numbers,
yeah,
it is seemingly becoming very clear that they could have actually gotten the numbers, because a lot, as an example, of MPs from the Eastern Province have actually gone to bed. Plus, they've now gone on a crusade to now take out, opposition MPs, call for a by-election, and, they are hoping to use their Mingalato to win those seats, as evidenced in Pambashe, as evidenced in Kawambwa, and the latest now is what they are at. They would want to go into Lumezi, they would want to go into Lavushimanda. So it looks like the agenda is, let's get more numbers beyond the very people who are twerking for Nshima.
Indeed.
The people who are dining with us.
That's interesting. Looks like we are coming to the... We have a lot to discuss, especially that the podcast, since Brother Emmanuel Mwamba left, has not been online. We have a lot to discuss. But I just wanted to discuss one of the biggest elephants in the room right now, and that is the cost of living. There is some concern that the cost of living in Zambia has exponentially risen. And these ones have been registered actually scientifically by organizations such as the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection. I just wanted to reflect on that as we come to a close. And then perhaps we can have a part 2. What do you think about the current cost of living in Zambia?
Well, very clearly now, the UPND do not have the capacity to be able to address the cost of living. It is not a question of whether it's a hearsay or it's reality, like you say. The cost of living now is beyond the reach of all ordinary Zambians. It's very difficult to go by now. Now, we ought to speak to what has caused the cost of living to go up. I think that one ingredient fundamentally that is critical to the cost of living is the cost of fuel. Because the cost of fuel pushes the cost of transport, cost of production, and thereabout. If you do not address the cost of fuel as one ingredient, you'll have messed it up. What have the UPND done? The UPND, who had, prior to 2021 general election, promised that they were going to cut off all the middlemen. Because remember, they used to make insinuation that the PF were adding a 3 kwacha on the cost of fuel.
There was a markup.
There was a markup that somebody from PF was adding. That is why the cost of fuel was very high. But if you remember, the cost of fuel in 2021 was just around 17 kwacha, right?
Indeed.
Today, the UPND makes a very, what I would call, a corrupt decision to, first of all, infamous decision to transform the Indeni pipeline from a carrier of multiple products to a single product carrier. Okay, the design by the KK government was to establish 2 institutions, Tazama and Indeni. Ideally was government would procure commingled fuel from the Middle East. The ship would come and dock in Tanzania, plug the ship to a pipeline. The pipeline called Tazama would transport that commingled fuel into Indeni, which was established to separate.
I am glad you have mentioned that, because that you are going towards the reason why there is such a high cost, and that we have done an hour already now, and I know you are a very busy man. I must at this point actually thank you very much, despite your very busy schedule, to come to the studio. So I would like to just ask one last thing on given the high cost of living that you have described, that has also been described by organizations such as JCTR. If there was to be an election next year, which there is going to be, do you think the current government of President Hakainde Hichilema can win that election? Also, in the current state that the opposition in Zambia stands, where there seems to be fragmentation and a sort of divisions, do you think there can be a change of government where the UPND becomes the first party in Zambia to lose an election on one term? What is your reading of the situation going into the next election? What do you think are the fundamentals that would make the UPND lose, and what do you think are the fundamentals that would make the opposition bounce back? Or what do you think the UPND can come back?
The situation now, Ambassador, is the same situation of 1990. We have the strongest opposition now as we had in 1990. In 1990, there was not a single political party. The opposition was the people, or where the people were dissatisfied with the UNIP rule. They only needed a vehicle which was created through the movement for multi-party democracy after the transition to multipartyism. The situation now is extremely the same. We may not have one single entity that we can point to that can bring the change, but the opposition, the people who are dissatisfied with the current state of things, is enormous.
So what is your conclusion on that?
The conclusion is that in 2026, the people will win. The people who are being affected by the high cost of living, the people who are being affected by these useless laws being enacted today, the people who are being affected by the regionalism, the people who are being affected by the unfair application of the law will carry the day.
Are you telling me that in the 4 years you haven't seen anything positive that President Hakainde Hichilema's government has done, such as the CDF and free education?
Well, there's something positive to talk about. CDF, at least they've been able to build toilets and 1x3 classrooms. Now, you cannot develop a country like Zambia using CDF. CDF can only be supplementary to development, because with CDF, you can't even build a third road. How much do we get? Ambassador, I can tell you, contrary to the celebrations, the actual amount we get for community projects is only about 12 to 15 million. To build a kilometer of roads is about 10 million. At least from the latest I got from the council.
So the 30 million that we hear about...
The 30 million is broken down into 3 segments, if not 4. The component for the council administration, the component for empowerment, component for skills. What remains is only about 15, 11 to 12, which doesn't even come. By the way, we've not received a ngwe of the CDF of 2025.
No way.
We've only received in Nkana, as an example, maybe less than 10 million of 2024.
No way.
When is that money going to come? When is that development going to come?
So
the UPND could have done something, and that is CDF, except this CDF is chaotic. And the celebration is actually misplaced. So the Zambian people will carry the day in 2026. Forget about whether the opposition is united. In fact, the opposition don't even need to unite.
Why not? How can they? There's a saying that united you stand,
there's not
divided
been,
you fall.
History would tell you there's not been a single time since 1991 when there were 2 parties competing. There's always been several parties, including in 1991 when we had just returned into multipartyism. So why should somebody think unless the opposition unite? What will win is people rallying around a common idea. The rest can also participate. So it shouldn't worry you. What should comfort people, all those who are crying today of the harsh realities on the ground now, is that the opposition is you and me who feels the pain today. What remains is you and me agreeing around what idea are we going to rally.
Thank you very much. You have been a full resource of information, also very inspiring. At only 43 years, there is a lot of issues that we needed to discuss. But this having been the first program, I think we have been restrained a little bit. We needed people to get to know you. and we need people to get to understand how you coalesce your ideas regarding the governance of the country. However, time cannot allow us, even though this is called the conversation, we cannot have it forever. So I'd like to thank you very much for taking time off your very busy schedule yet again.
Thank you.
To come and join us this evening. And I would also like to look into the camera and say to our viewers that the Conversation podcast is back, despite the absence of Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba. We will have Honorable Binwell Mpundu and several others like him, those that agree with the government and those that disagree with the government. The only way that we can have an honest conversation about our national development and where we're going forward is if we can have different and divergent views chorus in one room. So, Honorable Mpundu, I'm most grateful. I don't know whether you have any last word you would like to give us before we close on this debut program, which you have opened the floodgates for.
Sincerely, thank you, Ambassador, for the opportunity. And for me, my word to the Zambian is, in times of oppression, the only remedy you have is to unite.
Amazing. So at least we still get back to the same issue of unison. Thank you very much on that unity conclusion. Dear viewers, wherever you are catching us from, look out for the next podcast next week when we have another guest to tell us something different from what Honorable Mpundu has said, or even similar. From myself as your host at this particular time, Anthony Mukwita, is you have a good night and God bless you. Bye.